Good day to you. For my sins, and in a momentary lapse of sanity, I had agreed to speak about victory yet again. So, having made promises, I have to now fulfill them. There are very few ships that bring tears of boredom to my eyes quite the way that victory does. Because whenever we speak of victory, everybody is thinking of only one campaign in which the ship participated, the Trafalgar campaign. Whenever you mention victory, everybody is imagining her with the ugly closed stern of the later Napoleonic Wars, only as the flagship of Horatio Nelson, who happened to die aboard her. You would think that the Royal Navy never had any other ships or any other admirals for that matter, with all the noise that is made about the ship in this period. That is why I keep on saying that if I had $5 for every single model of victory that has been begun or built in her Trafalgar version, I wouldn't be here filming this. I would be somewhere in the Caribbean on an Edwardian period wooden yacht with somebody serving me drinks after drinks while I am enjoying the good weather with a good book under a shade and enjoying the occasional sail. Alas, that is not the case. But by all means, if you all modelers building the Victory want to send me, I'm more than happy to accept. Thank you. Now, more seriously, now in returning to the subject, and what I had promised to talk about is research of the Victory and alternatives to the Trafalgar version of the vessel. This is probably one of the best documented ships in the Royal Navy, or in any other navy for that matter. As we speak, she is undergoing yet another complete reconstruction renovation. They just completely finished scanning and building a photogrammetry recording of the framing of the ship. She has been stripped from her external planking. And a good friend of mine is now the chief archaeologist, Dr. Pacheco Ruiz. And the vessel had a long and very eventful history. She participated in numerous battles in numerous different periods in its existence, from the American Revolutionary War all the way to the end of the Napoleonic Wars. She had a very active career, very successful career. She did not fight in only one battle, the Trafalgar, and in fact, she spent the majority of her career looking quite different from what we see nowadays. Initially, the ship was ordered at the end of really in the middle of the 7 Years' War. She was not completed and commissioned until 1765. She's a Thomas Slade design. All of these are details that everybody knows, and they can easily be checked online quite conveniently. For most of her career, she had an open stern with balconies, a typical mid-18th century, the so-called Georgian style of stern, which I personally find to be far more graceful, far more beautiful than the later, cheaper, flat stern of the Trafalgar period. In fact, that is a view of the ship that only came about with the refit immediately prior to her recommissioning as Horatio Nelson's flagship for the Trafalgar campaign. By the later period, she also carried the typical so-called Nelson checker, the yellowish, ochreish bands with the black hull and black gun ports, but this again is a late version of the view. Initially, the ship was with paid sides, with black strap at the very top of the vessel and down around the waterline. She was coppered later in her career during the American Revolutionary War. Before that, she had her bottom paid. So that's why in early models surviving in the National Maritime Museum's collections, you are going to see the lower hull of the ship painted white. That is from the white lead paint-based covering that was used to protect the underwater hulls of ships prior to the introduction of coppering. The grace of the Balkans, the ship is immeasurable. So what information can we obtain about the ship? Starting with her logbooks, the majority of which survive in the archives. Logbooks are very interesting reading, but they give you more information about where the ship was at certain periods of its history, where it was cruising, what tasks it was involved with. Upon occasion, it can tell you something about her sailing characteristics, how she was handled, but you are unlikely to learn much about the way she looked. Still, it is a useful and interesting source of information, and I at least am insane enough to delight in reading contemporary logbooks. Admittedly, most people might find them dull-going, even if they are able to decipher the handwriting of the different masters and officers of the ship. In another video, I have already discussed about what is in the archives and what sort of information logbooks can provide and what types of logbooks survive. Here is a link to that video, so I will not repeat myself here. Because she was one of the few, and probably one of the best of the first-rate 100-gun three-deckers, we have numerous portraits surviving of the ship from different periods of her career. She fought at the Battle of Ushan. She was the flagship of Augustus Keppel, and they are, I'm aware of minimum one, but I think that there are more like 2 or 3 paintings of that battle that do show her under different angles. There are numerous paintings showing her from the stern, usually the port quarter of the vessel, that show you a beautiful view of the stern with the open galleries. So if you're going to be building, if you absolutely have to and can't avoid building a model of Victory, why not build her in her rarer view, in the view in which she spent most of her career, where most of her famous actions were actually fought. She fought at Ushan, as I mentioned. She fought at the Battle of 14th of February 1797, in other words, the Battle of St. Vincent. She was the flagship of Sir John Jarvis, future Earl of St. Vincent. There she still was in her beautiful view, and after all, this is one of the more interesting and famous battles of the period. I already feel the temptation to diverge into discussing the Battle of Trafalgar versus other battles, whether it was interesting or not, whether it was challenging tactically or not. It wasn't really. But I will try to stick to the ship. So besides the portraits, the numerous paintings, including by such people as Thomas Looney, there is a portrait also, I believe, by Dominic Serres of the ship. There is enough information to provide a beautiful source of, for constructing a model of the vessel before the Trafalgar campaign. Subsequently, of course, she served in the Baltic as the flagship of Somers during the Baltic campaign. Drawings of the ship, as in technical drawings of the ship, I doubt that there is any ship that has as many copies of her original drawings surviving in the archives as the Victory. We have the initial construction drawings, we have the design, we have views of the cabins on the lower deck and on the orlop of the ship. We have sketches of her in ordinary with coverings. We have her in the different modifications. We have her after the rebuildings in the later 18th century when riders were added to her, when some knees were modified to strengthen the hull of the vessel. There is numerous documentation. The one absolute perfect source of all this is the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich. And there is a link down there to the site. If you go to the drawings, all you have to do is type HMS Victory and everything comes out. Among many other moments, I have said it before, I'll repeat it again, HMS is an absolute mistake for this period. The first that I have seen dates to the mid-19th century, the first use of this shortening. In all contemporary documents throughout the Napoleonic Wars, you're going to see it His Majesty's ship or HM's ship or some modified and shortened version of His Majesty, but you're not going to see HMS. This is a modern misnomer, and it pains me every time that I see it in conjunction with a historical vessel. But that is because I may be somewhat obsessive on the subject. Returning to the vessel, as I said, I'm looking forward to seeing somebody actually build a model of her in her original view. In years past, I had the privilege of knowing Peter Goodwin when he was curator of the Victory, and I spent beautiful 4 hours inside the hold discussing the framing patterns of Victory, what we actually see aboard the ship versus what is on the drawings and the specifications. And the reason I'm mentioning Mr. Goodwin here in this stage is because he had been able to trace through the repair records of the vessel that exists both in the National Maritime Museum but also in the National Archives at Kew. He was able to trace the replacement of every single timber that was ever put into the ship. All this documentation, the numerous repairs, the progress reports exist in the correspondence from the dockyards where she was maintained and in the correspondence of the Navy Board, which after all was the institution responsible for the maintenance, for the materiel of the Royal Navy from its creation during the reign of King Henry VIII all the way until the 1830s, when the Navy Board was subsumed by the Admiralty, the British. So if anyone wants to build such a model, the documentation, the data is all there for a truly accurate model. And please do me a favor and somebody build a model of her in her original beautiful look rather than the Trafalgar one. With this, I wish you all the best for the rest of your day and happy modeling.